Okay, so this is a part 2 to the previous video, so go back and watch the other one. Otherwise, it might not make that much sense. Um, anyway, I've been talking about the Mormons and how it ties into the Paris attack with the movie Team America and whatnot. But one of the things I forgot to point out earlier when I was talking about the number 56 is that Michigan also plays Penn State. That's Michigan's next game is against Penn State on Saturday. We talked about how Penn State and the Jerry Sandusky stuff was connected to the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Seems like everything that they've been doing ties back to Philadelphia in one way or the other. So anyway, that movie, he works for Callahan Auto Parts. Callahan was a Nebraska coach, or he owns Callahan Auto Parts. It's based in Sandusky, Ohio, and in the very beginning of the movie, instead of writing John Hancock, he writes Herbie Hancock, and that's supposed to be the big joke. But John Hancock just so happens to be the very first signer of the Declaration of Independence. And there's 56 people who signed the Declaration of Independence. John Hancock, famous for being the first one. And look how old he was when he died. 56 years old. Anyway, some other recent 91s in the news. CC Sabathia's real name adds up to 91. Remember, he dropped out right before the Yankees played in the playoffs or whatever. The movie Ender's Game, I've talked about how it's, the end of the Mormon Bible, the end of the King James Bible, whatever. Ender's Game, 91. The character that Harrison Ford plays adds up to 91. Just interesting because of the new Star Wars movie coming out, and also because his ex-wife just died recently in the news. And speaking of the end, in the movie Ghostbusters 2, they talk about how the alien told her that the world is going to end on Valentine's Day in 2016. Valentine's Day, of course, the second day of Lupercalia. Ghostbusters 2 adds up to 191. All the coaches that resigned in 91. But the word 91 written out, 121 and 49, just like the word Revelation, just like the word Valentine's, with the S exception, it's even 49. He also had Bridgewater that got hurt for the Vikings 91. The two players of Mississippi State, the team that Missouri had played the day before the protest or whatever, they were going to a high school football game in this town, adds up to 91. Talked about some of this. This is a player for Nebraska who got hurt when he was celebrating a play, and his name adds up to 91. I also talked about Cameron Wake of the Miami Dolphins, and he's the number 91, and he tore his Achilles tendon. Also, I think it was the game before that, they played the Texans, and Arian Foster tore his Achilles. Miami was winning 41-0 at halftime. Like I said, 41 and 91 go together. There was even stuff about the Richie Incognito, the ex-Nebraska player, and then Ndamukong Suh, the ex-Nebraska player, both of the Bullies. But Buffalo played in Miami this year. It was the first time Richie Incognito was back. Buffalo won 41-14. And I mentioned how it seemed like there was a lot to do with the Achilles tendon being torn in sports and whatnot. And I hadn't figured it out. I said, I don't know. It just seems like there's been a lot more Achilles tendons being torn than in the past or whatever. I know it's happened before. I know Dan Marino had it. It just seems like it's really stood out. Even Kobe Bryant had it against the Golden State Warriors. Kobe Bryant's originally from Philadelphia. I talked about a lot of this in previous videos. I have that one I talked about. I think it was the Fresh Prince, and it had to do with Wilt Chamberlain and Kobe Bryant and why he scored the 81 points in a game. But Achilles tendon even adds up to 141, like 14 and 41. But I figured it out. It all does tie into the Paris attacks. Achilles, the Greek hero of the Trojan War, that's where we get the Achilles tendon from, or the Achilles heel. He actually got killed by Paris. I mean, come on now. So, just what are the odds? I've been following these storylines for a while now, and it's all starting to piece together, especially with the Paris attack. So anyway, the whole point was just about Team America and how the creators of South Park they both it they do a lot of stuff making fun of the Mormons. I've talked about the Mormons and how it all goes together with this year or whatever, the Book of Mormon, and how it ties into Pope Francis and whatnot. But think about this movie too, Team America. The whole movie, it is puppets, right? They do the little string puppets, just like on the I Pet Goat movie. I mean, I've talked about this a billion times. This movie is so super coded. We talked about the Curse of the Billy Goat. Talked about how it ties into Lupercalia. But I mean, it starts off with George Bush as the puppet, just like Team America. George Bush even says in this movie here, he says, "Fool me once, shame on you." And for one, when you add that up in gematria, it adds up to 239. Like I said, that's how many chapters are in the Mormon Bible. It's the 239th year of the United States. But the thing about it is that he's the puppet, just like Team America. He says, "Fool me once, shame on you." It's supposed to be "fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me," I believe. So all they're saying is they're comparing it to 9/11 maybe. Because I just talked about in the part 1 about how they're almost doing the exact same thing with the numbers with 9/11 as they're doing with the Paris attack. So, fool me once, shame on you. I mean, it's kind of funny because they are literally fooling the majority of people for the second time. This movie too, Team America's headquarters is in the Mount Rushmore and the statues or whatever at Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore adds up to 65. And this number 65, it's the mirror of 56, but it sticks out to me because just last night we had the two bomb threats for the planes, and then they had to go other places, and one of them was plane Flight 65. So here's the article about it even. I was watching it last night. It's really funny. The footage, the lady, they were interviewing some lady, and she's saying was talking about the bomb threats and how it might not be real, and then she actually she said the second hoax, like she already knew, even though she just said that she didn't know. And then she said the second hoax, and then she kind of stopped or whatever. It's pretty funny. But anyway, Flight 65 was going from Los Angeles to Paris. This is also Air France or whatever. But it was diverted to, go figure, Salt Lake City, home of the Mormons. And that lady they were interviewing and talking about as a hoax? She said that it was like two bomb threats that were called in from the ground. Well, it even says that right here. Wow. But how in the world, she's like warning the people, if it is a hoax, it's not funny and it's a serious matter and blah, blah, blah. How in the world would they not know who it was or where it's coming from? That doesn't even make any sense. If I got on my cell phone right now and I called 911 and hung up, they would call back within like 10 seconds. I've actually even done it before. I mean, you're telling me that this, with all the heightened whatever, with ISIS and all that, and they don't even know like where it's coming from, or like, come on, it just seems really fishy. Anyway, so, it's all about the Mormons. These guys even wrote the musical or whatever that was about the Mormons. I think it was called The Book of Mormon. Yeah, the musical, The Book of Mormon. I remember one of their first movies was called Orgasmo, and they actually played the Mormon guys that knock on the door where they're filming the porno. Even on South Park, there's the episode called All About the Mormons, where they make fun of the story of the Mormons and Joseph Smith and whatnot. I mean, interesting in gematria, all about the Mormons adds up to 71, just like World War III, and everyone has AIDS. It all ties in. I mean, here's a few other 71s that I've been mentioned lately. Moses, even the 10 Commandments adds up to 71. Nebraska, where, Lincoln, Nebraska, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves just like Moses. Even Federal Reserve, so Super Bowl 50. But the day that this episode came out was kind of interesting to me. It says it was November 19th, 2003. And if you go to Brother Berg's blog here, he has a theory or talks about the 8 years and 11 day theory, blah, blah, blah. But, you can come read it. There's a whole bunch about it. But he talks about the double whammy of 11/13 and also 11/19 as future alert dates. And this episode came out on 11/19 as well. I mean, in 2003, still pretty interesting. And holy cow, I just watched the new South Park in between when I was making these videos, and literally, this whole episode is pretty much about how everybody in the world, except for a very few amount of people, are blind to the lies in the media, and all the ads block out what's really going on in the world. And no one can see what's really going on in the world except for the retarded kid Jimmy. Or Jimmy's actually crippled, Timmy's the retarded one. I also forgot to mention, like, the word African American is 71, but if you add up 71, it adds up to 144, a super special number, especially dealing with, like, the assassination of presidents. I mean, think about it. This is the day that, if you do that as a date, that's the day that Abraham Lincoln was shot, and whatever. If you add it up, if you add up 44, it's 144. April 4th, 144, kind of like 4-4. Obama's the 44th president. The first president to die in office died on 4-4. So who knows what they're really foreshadowing? Are they going to kill Obama? And is it going to start a war? I mean, not even necessarily World War III, just any type of war, whatever. Also, 144 has ties to Mark of the Beast, adds up to 144. The last 144 digits after the decimal of pi add up to 666. And I point that out because since 9/11 and Paris both had ties to the number 110, Osama bin Laden, I showed it all in the first video. I went 110 days before 9/11, and it takes you to the 144th day of the year that year. So I took 110 days before the Paris attacks. That takes you to 7/26 of 2015. Very interesting day. That is Obama's 6th year, 6th month, and 6th day of being president. And the next day, they had the unveiling of the satanic statue in Detroit. Just pointing it out, Detroit adds up to 91. Detroit was who the Cubs played in the 1945 World Series. That all tied back in to the curse of the Billy Goat. And Detroit is the Tigers. We just had the whole race stuff with the Missouri Tigers. Charlie Sheen has Tiger's blood. For the reason I remembered this lady at the Omaha Henry Dorley Zoo. She snuck in and tried to pet a tiger and got bit. Of course, she's 33 years old. Henry Dorley Zoo adds up to 215, kind of like the last day of Lupercalia. But the reason I'm talking about Omaha is because on one of ISIS's list of targets was Bellevue, Nebraska, which is like in South Omaha. And it adds up to 56, like all these other 56 I talked about. George Bush also went there on 9/11 to Offutt Air Force Base. Also, the South Carolina, the Charleston church shooting this year, it happened on 110 Calhoun Street. I talked about Fort Calhoun, that is just north of Omaha, that has the nuclear power plant and a possible blackout. So it's named after John C. Calhoun. And he is a person who some people believe he actually is what led up to the Civil War, his actions. So whatever, hopefully that makes sense. There's plenty more than this. I just get so lost because it's so interwebbed, but all of these things go together. The storylines just keep seeming to come true every time I think of a story that goes with it. It really seems like they're following that story over and over, and I follow it for months. I mean, the Mormon thing is insane. But anyway, one last thing is November 19th actually adds up to 91, and I just talked about November 19th, which is also, it'll be in like a half hour. So I guess we'll see. Even when you think about November 19th, it's 11, whatever, like that, or also 19, 11. Just interesting numbers. It even looks like 9/11. If you add up the date, it even adds up to 65. The mirror of 56, and remember, the word mirror is 91 even. It's also the 323rd day of the year. Lucifer and Jewish gematria, this website doesn't do it, adds up to 323. Just interesting enough with the mirrored number, 3223. Also, it's 58 days after Pope Francis visited the United States. Another topic, but Anyway, have a good night.